All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. All three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Now today I am doing my top 100 greatest novels of all time ranking video. This is greatest novels according to me. In other words, my favorite novels of all time. And man, I have been reading books since I was 12 years old. So that's some 17,000 years of reading. In fact, my library upstairs here has some 5,000 books in it. My library downstairs has another couple thousand. So I had like 7,000 books to choose from, and it was hard to narrow down my top 100. In fact, some of my favorite authors didn't even make the list, like Walter Mosley, Stephen R. Donaldson, Robert Heinlein, James Lee Burke. Those guys didn't even make a book on the list of 100. They're some of my favorite novelists, but some of my other favorite novelists actually had multiple novels make the top 100. So let's just get to it. Let's get to it right away. Coming in at number 100 is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I can already hear the moans and groans throughout the universe. Durfee, why do you putting this pretentious literary horseshit right up front of your book ranking? What are you trying to look like, smart or something? Well, yeah, I am trying to look a little smart, but I actually did really like this book. It was the book that got me interested in whaling, how to, do all that stuff. It was just a very good book to me. However, that's number 100. However, I will make that up to you by having at number 99, Dragons of Winter Night by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. Book number 2 in the Dragonlance saga. This book, when I was a young kid of 13, was the epitome of literary brilliance in my mind. This is a nostalgia pick. I love Dragonlance, and I loved Dragons of Winter Night. Coming in at number 98 is Cujo by Stephen King. I love his just straight up monster horror novels like Cujo and the vampires, the dogs and the vampires and the evil pets. I love that. So Cujo comes in at 98. 97, one of my favorite mystery novels of all time, Gorky Park by Martin Cruz Smith. Russia, communism, very, very intense, claustrophobic mystery novel. Coming in at number 96 is The Fall of Hyperion by Dan Simmons. I love the Hyperion Cantos of 4 books. This is book number 2. It was my favorite of the Dan Simmons Hyperion novels. Comes in at number 96. Coming in at number 95, another one of Stephen King's monster novels, and that is Salem's Lot. Probably one of my favorite vampire stories of all time. There might be another one on the list that I like even more than this, but Salem's Lot is dope. Number 94 is Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke. I'm surprised this is a 94. It should be ranked higher. Everything should be ranked higher. 94. I read this in one sitting. I was riveted by this first contact science fiction story. Coming in at number 93, my favorite gangster mafia novel, even more so than The Godfather. I like The Gold Coast by Nelson DeMille. Just one of the best gangster mafia stories ever told. Another Stephen King Animals Gone Wild horror novel, that is Pet Sematary, comes in at number 92. Number 92, Stephen King, Pet Sematary. And then number 91, probably one of the grim darkest of the grim dark fantasy series, is Malazan, Book of the Fallen. My favorite book of the Malazan 10-book series by Steven Erikson was Dead House Gates. It comes in at number 91. And then another great grim dark... Oh, I'm throwing these books on the floor and I think I'm ruining most of them. Anyway, number 90 is Michael Moorcock's Elric of Melny Bonnet. Book number 1 in his vast, huge Elric saga. Elric, the albino swordsman with his sword Stormbreaker, comes in at number 90. Number 89. And this is a book I just read a week ago, and it launched itself into my top 100 just off the strength of its story and its conspiracy theories that I loved, and that is The Devil Colony. Part of the Sigma Force series by James Rollins, comes in at number 89. Coming in at number 88 is another Stephen King novel, and that is The Dark Tower, book number 7 in his Dark Tower series. I did like the final book the most of all those books in the series. Coming in at number 87, I'm 17 and I'm crazy. Probably one of my favorite lines in all of literature, and that comes from Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Comes in at number 87. Just a great science fiction novel with a cool message. And then my favorite vampire novel of all time is Carrion Comfort by Dan Simmons, and it comes in at number 86. Dan Simmons, Carrion Comfort, just a big, massive, epic vampire novel. My favorite of all time, no offense to Edward or Jacob fans. 85, Foundation by Isaac Asimov, book number 1 in his Foundation trilogy. This is the book from whence all other science fiction space opera novels sprung. It is just absolutely cool. Book number 84, we jump back into the realm of the pretentious with Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I don't know why this Russian writer Tolstoy speaks to me, but it just seems like every line that he writes, I get it, and I dig it, and I like it. Anna Karenina is great. Coming in at number 83 is probably my favorite mystery writer of all time, and that's Dennis Lehane. And this is Gone, Baby Gone. This is book number 4 in his Kenzie and Gennaro mystery series, Gone, Baby Gone. Great mystery novel. We'll be seeing some more we'll be seeing Dennis, not Kenneth. Dennis Lehane. We've also got Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, a great gothic historical thriller about a guy that solves a murder in an abbey in the 1300s in northern Italy. Just a great book. And then another great mystery novel, Greg Iles' Natchez Burning, comes in at number 81. This is book number 1 in his Natchez trilogy of mystery novels. This is a really well-written piece of literary fiction and a great mystery novel. Coming in at number 80 is... How did I go from, 81 to 80? That's the way it works. So number 80 is The Intensity by Dean Koontz. This is an intense book. I read this in one sitting. I couldn't look away from this book. This book is dope. It is super intense, thus the name. One of my favorite and fun science fiction novels I've ever read comes in at 79, and that is Red Shirts by John Scalzi. Just a clever idea, really well told. I liked it. Even kind of got me teary-eyed at the end. And then we've got Sharpe's Tiger at 78. This is book number 1 in the Bernard Cornwell, Richard Sharpe, Sharpe's Rifles series of novels, and Sharpe's Tiger is my favorite of the group. There's about 21 novels in that series. Swan Song by Robert McCammon comes in at 77. Post-apocalyptic epic novel. When I was working in the prison libraries at the Utah State Prison, this was the most stolen book out of my libraries. I had to buy like 10 copies every year for each library because it would get stolen so much. Lord of the Flies, number 76 by William Golding. Lord of the Flies. We've got A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles, just a great piece of literary fiction. Very subtle, very well written, very interesting book and unique. Gentleman in Moscow. My favorite British mystery writer of all time is Elizabeth George, and this Body of Death is part of her Inspector Lynley series. It's probably book 13 or 14 of the series. There's about 20 books in the series. This one was my favorite if you love British mysteries. Of course, we've got The Eye of the World, book number 1 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. It's just spectacular fantasy. One of the first book in one of the greatest fantasies of all time. Book number 72 is Desperation by Stephen King. I grew up in the desert Southwest. This is a horror novel set in the desert Southwest. I loved it. It just was so perfect. And then we've got Diana Gabaldon's Dragonfly and Amber. I love the Outlander series. This is my favorite book in the Outlander series. This is book number 2. This is about time travel, Scottish history, Revolutionary War history. It's just great, and it comes in at number 71. And it's so well written and so well researched. One of my favorite and probably one of the funnest fantasy novels I've ever read comes in at number 70, and that's The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. Just one of the best fantasy debuts I've ever read, comes in at number 70. And then one of the best science fiction debuts I've ever read, my good friend Christopher Rocchio, The Empire of Silence, book number 1 of his Sun Eater series, comes in at 69. This guy is the best new science fiction writer in the history of the world. I consider him a great friend of mine, and his book series is seriously lit. It is on fire, folks. Talking about on fire, Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb comes in at number 68, and it is my favorite book. This is the first book of the Realm of the Elderlings. It is my favorite book, Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. A great science fiction novel, The Martian by Andy Weir, comes in at 67. This is just so well written, so clever, so engaging. Just one of those books you can't look away from, The Martian by Andy Weir. And then we have, coming in at number 66, the quintessential Stephen King novel, Needful Things. I love everything about this book, from the cover to the story. It's just classic Stephen King in all its glory. Coming in at number 65, we have Bernard Cornwell's The Last Kingdom. This is the first book in his The Last Kingdom tale. I think it's the Saxon Tales. I can't remember. There's like about 12 books in the series about Vikings. Great book. Bernard Cornwell, such a great writer. Now, Louis L'Amour, people know him for his westerns. Coming in at number 64 is his horror novel, The Haunted Mesa. It is great. Now, my favorite of all time Louis L'Amour novels is coming in at number 63, and that is The Californios. This is also a western with a little bit of a supernatural flair to it. And these are my two favorite Louis L'Amour novels, and they come in at 64, 63. Then we've got The Firm by John Grisham. I read this when I was young. It was one of the first thriller novels I've ever read. Probably the best legal thriller ever written, The Firm by John Grisham. Absolutely one of those books, those page-turner books. The Shadow of the Torturer by Gene Wolfe. Classic science fiction by one of the best writers you're ever going to read. This is literary fantasy at the best. 61, Shadow of the Torturer by Gene Wolfe. We've got another great science fiction novel here, a modern science fiction, Leviathan Wakes, comes in at number 60 by James S.A. Corey. Need I say more? Book number 1 in the Expanse series. Now, one of the best fantasy novels I've read in the last 20 years was Tad Williams' Into the Narrow Dark. This is book number 3 in his Last King of Austin Ard series, comes in at number 59. And we might see some more Tad Williams on the list. We've got another Dennis Lehane novel. This is his newest one. It just came out about 6 months ago, and it's one of his best. It's Small Mercies, a mystery novel set in Boston. Dennis Lehane comes in at number 58. Coming in at number 56, The Killer Angels by Michael Shara. Now, this is about Gettysburg, and this book is the reason I visited Gettysburg. In fact, I visit a lot of places. A lot of my vacations are planned around books that I read and places I want to go. Number 56 is The First Man in Rome by Colleen McCullough. This is the Rome series. It's about 6 books long. All of them are epic. Everything you wanted to know about Caesar and the Roman times back then. This is just absolutely great book for historical fiction lovers. One of my favorite thrillers of all time is Without Remorse by Tom Clancy. This is not part of the Jack Ryan. Well, this is part of the Jack Ryan series. It is about the assassin and tough guy Clark, though. It's not about Jack Ryan. But Tom Clancy's Without Remorse comes in at 55. Coming in at 54 is another political thriller, and that is The Power of the Dog by Don Winslow. This one is all about how brutal and how grim the Mexican cartel and things at our U.S.-Mexican border can get. It is absolutely crazy and grim, and it reminds me of that movie Cesario. That's The Power of the Dog by Don Winslow. And then we've got a book that made me cry. The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak comes in at 53. This book actually made me cry at the end. It's about World War II. Need we say more? It's about the Holocaust, things like that. Then we've got The Streets of Laredo by Larry McMurtry coming in at 52. This is book number 4 in his Lonesome Dove series, which is one of my favorite series of all time. Book number 4, Streets of Laredo, one of the greatest Western stories ever told. And then book number 51, John Irving, The Hotel New Hampshire. More of a literary type writer is John Irving. Hotel New Hampshire was my favorite of all of his books. It's just funny, it's clever, the characters are engaging, the dialogue is witty and super good. Coming in at number 50 is one of the more interesting thrillers I've ever read, and that is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Probably has one of the best opening sentences I've ever read. Got me hooked on her writing and hooked on her books. Number 49 is Tad Williams' Otherland. This is The City of a Golden Shadow, book number 1 in his Otherland series. He has a 4-book series. Virtual reality, science fiction. Tad Williams, one of my favorite writers. We'll probably see some more of his books on the list here. Number 48, War and Remembrance. This is book number 2 in Herman Wouk's massive World War II saga. Everything you needed to know about World War II packed into these books. We might see book number 1 coming up on the list soon. Book number 47 is the future of fantasy and science fiction is Brandon Sanderson. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The Words of Radiance. This is book number 2 of his Stormlight Archives. It's my favorite book in the Stormlight Archives. It comes in at number 47. Brandon Sanderson, just a master genius writer. The future of fantasy. Coming in at number 46 is The Green Mile by Stephen King. I love his prison stories. As you know, I've worked at a prison. Whenever people ask me, people who've never read Stephen King, whenever they say, what book should I start with, I always tell them The Green Mile, because it's a good starting place for people new to Stephen King. Another modern literary writer is Pat Conroy, and my favorite book of his is The Great Santini, about a Navy, Air Force, Marine, fighter pilot. I don't know which branch of the military he belongs to at the minute, but it's a relationship between him and his son, and how a father can really expect too much of a son. The Shadow Rising, my favorite Wheel of Time book. In fact, I just reviewed this yesterday on the channel. But this is book number 4 in the Wheel of Time. It is my favorite Wheel of Time book by Robert Jordan, The Shadow Rising. One of the greatest fantasy sagas ever told, The Wheel of Time. And then we've got Neil Stephenson's Cryptonomicon. This book, I don't even know how to describe it. Just pick it up, read the back of it, and if it's for you, it's for you. But it is most definitely for me. Cryptonomicon, sort of a World War II adventure story with a lot of mathematics in it. And then we've got The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Now, Donna Tartt is my literary crush. I could watch videos of her all day just talking about how she writes and her stories and all that. The Secret History, one of the greatest mystery novels of all time. And then we've got All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Dior. This is a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel about World War II, Saint Malo, France. In fact, I visited Saint Malo, France because of this book. That is number 41. Coming in at number 40, another great World War II novel. This is a thriller, The Eye of the Needle. One of the best thrillers about World War II ever, and it's by Ken Follett. And we might see some more Ken Follett, too. One of my favorite mystery writers, probably in my top 5 favorite mystery writers, is Michael Connelly. The Poet is a masterpiece of just murder and mayhem and police procedural stuff. The Poet is great. Then we've got The Winds of War. You probably saw me hold up the other Herman Wouk book. This is book number 1 in his World War II saga. Like I said, everything you ever wanted to know about World War II, why it started, how it ended, and everything in between. Book number 38, The Winds of War by Herman Wouk. Book number 37 is one of my favorite science fiction novels of all time, and that is Carl Sagan's Contact. I just love this book. It's a first contact novel. It's called Contact. And then one of the best standalone fantasy novel, well, probably, yeah, this The Lions of Al-Rassan by Guy Gavriel Kay. Whenever I read Guy Gavriel Kay books, I just want to give up on my own writing, because I'm like, I'll never match the talent that this guy has. But this is my favorite book of his, The Lions of Al-Rassan, a great fantasy novel. And then we go back to Bernard Cornwell, talking about guys that when I read their prose, I feel so inadequate. Bernard Cornwell wrote this great trilogy about King Arthur. This is The Winter King. This is book number 1 in the trilogy about King Arthur. And I like this, number 35, Bernard Cornwell. We've got The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This is one of those, Cormac McCarthy is an acquired taste. His prose and the way he writes can just be bizarro. But The Road is just a poignant, short novel that you can sit through in one day, and it'll just make you think about your life and all that stuff. And then Comanche Moon, Larry McMurtry, another Lonesome Dove book. This is book number 2 in the Lonesome Dove saga, Comanche Moon. Like I said, I love everything about Larry McMurtry's writing. In fact, when I write, I try to emulate Larry McMurtry more than anybody else. That's how much I love his writing. Book number 32 is The Children of Dune. This is book number 3 in Frank Herbert's Dune saga. I love Dune. It's the best science fiction, in my opinion, ever written. This is book number 3, comes in at number 32. And then we've got another Stephen King, The Long Walk by Stephen King, comes in at number 31. Just one of the most bizarro Stephen King books you'll ever read, but it's so interesting and so good. Zane Grey's The Riders of the Purple Sage comes in at 30. It's just a great Western. This was written over 100 years ago and has one of the best gunslingers and one of the best villains in any Western. Now, a modern Western, now C.J. Box, the Joe Pickett series, has become one of my favorite things in the world. There's about 20 books in the Joe Pickett mystery series. This is book number 1, open season. It comes in at number 29. It is just so good. C.J. Box, his writing is flawless and effortless. He's almost like the Michael Jordan of mystery writers. Okay, North and South by John Jakes. This is like Herman Wouk's World War II saga, but this one is about the Civil War. Everything you needed to know about the Civil War is in this book. Why it started, how it ended, everything in between. John Jakes, North and South. Great historical novel. Then my favorite Tom Clancy thriller, and probably one of my favorite thrillers of all time, is Patriot Games. It is just the perfect thriller novel and absolutely delightful. Another perfect novel is 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This comes in at number 26. It is almost the perfect novel. And it's another one of the books that kind of made me tear up at the end. One of Stephen King's better endings to a novel. I will say that with 100% confidence. Then we've got John Le Carré's Tailor, Tinker, Soldier, Spy, one of my favorite spy books. This isn't like James Bond over-the-top spy stuff. This is more like what it's really like to be a spy in the world. That's why I like it. It's very realistic. John Le Carré's prose is dense and literary, and you just can't breeze through it. You got to read those books and think about them. Cold Mountain by Charles Frazier, another Civil War novel. Just absolute literary brilliance. This is really, really good. And then we've got the Da Vinci Code, and I might take a lot of crap for this one, ranking it at number 23, but the Da Vinci Code is one of the best thrillers you're ever going to read. I remember sitting and reading this, and I just couldn't stop turning the pages, which makes it a great book, in my opinion. Then we get to number 22, The Life of Pi. I liked this book. It's a quirky little book about a kid stuck on a life raft with a bunch of zoo animals. It's bizarro and cool. And then we've got Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. This is book number 1 in the Song of Ice and Fire. This comes in at number 21. George R.R. Martin, nobody writes medieval fantasy adventure quite as well as him. And then The Terror by Dan Simmons. Set up above the Arctic Circle about a monster terrorizing a shipwrecked group of guys, and it is absolutely riveting. It is in my top 20. In fact, it's number 20. It's that good. The Terror by Dan Simmons. And then number 19 is The Dragonbone Chair, book number 1 in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn by Tad Williams. This is one of those books that changed my life. This is one of those books that solidified in my mind that I wanted to be a writer just because his prose was so elegant. The story was so good. I loved it. Book number 18 is Stephen King's It. This is one of the best coming-of-age tales you'll ever, with a killer clown. In fact, I love coming-of-age horror novels. This is one of the best. There might be another one on the list that I think is even better. Let's talk about War and Peace. Like I said, I love everything Leo Tolstoy writes. I relate to this guy in every sentence he writes. I don't know why, but War and Peace is number 17 on my list. It is an absolute epic Russian adventure. And then we've got, of course, Ender's Game at 16, which is just a great... I read this when I was young, and it's another one that I can reread today. It still holds up as a great little adventure novel, a great little tale where you're rooting for the good guys and hoping the bad guys get. And then we've got The Caine Mutiny, my favorite World War II novel of all time, The Caine Mutiny. This is also by Herman Wouk, who wrote that big World War II saga. This is about what it's like when commanders are bad at their job and when people mutiny. It's a great World War II. Then we've got at number 14, Alaska by James Michener. I grew up in Alaska. I admit that's one of the reasons I hold this in such high regard, is because of my history with Alaska. James Michener, everything you want to know about Alaska and Alaska Adventure right there. Number 13, again, my literary crush, Donna Tartt, comes in at number 13 with The Goldfinch. Again, Donna Tartt is my literary crush. I've watched every YouTube video that she's interviewed in. I just love everything she has to say about her life and writing and all of that. And then we've got James Clavell's Shogun, which is dope. I mean, this is like 16th century British and Dutch sailors stranded on the Japanese. It's like an alien. The Japanese are like aliens to them. They have to figure it out. It's a very good adventure novel. Book number 11, To Kill a Mockingbird. I read this in one sitting and was riveted with every word of it. It just spoke so much volumes to me when I was younger. It comes in Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird, number 11. Now let's get to the top 10. The top 10. And we're going to start it off in high fashion with The Sword of Shannara by Terry Brooks. This is the first ever novel that I bought with my own money as a kid and read of my own volition. And it set me on, 100 pages into this book, I knew I wanted to be a writer. This is another one of those books. Nostalgia pick, one of those books that changed my life. The Sword of Shannara. Book number 9, of course, is the greatest science fiction novel of all time, and that is Dune. I don't think I need to say more. I mean, Dune is just... The Dune saga is the greatest science fiction saga of all time. The greatest mystery novel ever written, in my opinion, is Dennis Lehane's Mystic River. I love Mystic River. A mystery novel set in Boston. Dennis Lehane's prose is just second to none. Storm of Swords, book number 3 in the Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, is almost the best fantasy novel ever, but there's going to be a few more that you're going to see that I like better. But The Storm of Swords, nobody does fantasy better than George Martin, except for a couple people, and you'll see. The Pillars of the Earth is my favorite historical fiction novel of all time. This book, as I read it, I was like, okay, I don't want to ever have lived in the Middle Ages. That was bad, it was brutal, it was grim, it was difficult. Why would anybody have wanted to live in the Middle Ages? It's a book about just some normal people trying to build a cathedral in 11th century England, and it is intense. My book number 5, Boy's Life by Robert McCammon, is a horror novel. Like Stephen King's it's a coming-of-age tale, but I think this coming-of-age tale is even better than the coming-of-age tale that was in It. This is my favorite coming-of-age story of all time. Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. Everything in it just reminds me of my childhood and what it was like to be a young boy growing up. My 4th favorite novel of all time is To Green Angel Tower by Tad Williams. This is book number 3 in his Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series. And this is the book, when it was going to be released, I anticipated this book so much. This was my most anticipated book ever. And man, when I finally got my hands on it, it met all expectations and more. To Green Angel Tower, book number 4, my all-time favorite. Book number 3, we're just going to go with the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. That's book number 3. It's like Dune, the best science fiction is Dune. The best fantasy is Lord of the Rings, in my opinion. Everything that Tolkien did in Lord of the Rings was magnificent. So we're down to the final 2. The final 2, everybody. And here we go. Sometimes these flip-flop, which one is 1 and which one is 2. But for the purposes of this video, Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry comes in at number 2. Like I said, the best Western novel ever written. One of the best stories ever told. Some of the best characters ever written about. And his prose, his dialogue, the way his sense of humor is, I try to emulate everything Larry McMurtry does in his writing. In my own writing, comes in at number 2. And then my favorite, greatest novel of all time is Stephen King's The Stand. Post-apocalyptical horror novel. Epic, 1,200 pages of just great writing, great storytelling. Again, another writer where I just try to emulate everything this guy does. And The Stand is my favorite, number 1, greatest novel of all time. And now, my friends, let's go to the pile of books that I just made on the floor. And this will just disturb everybody, because all those books, all my favorite books, I just tossed into a pile on the floor. And my OCD is spiking at about 10 right now, just looking at that pile. Oh my gosh. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. In the comments, let me know if you agree with any of these books or what your top 100 is.